Welcome to the Startup Competitors Podcast, where we talk with early-stage entrepreneurs to understand what information they use to inform product roadmap, strategy, and market differentiation.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we have Patrick Sells with Sells Group. Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be on.
Why don't we start with a quick overview of Sells Group and what you guys do?
Sure. Sells Group is focused on innovative customer acquisition through digital marketing. So what that means practically is we try to help companies not just do marketing or gain brand awareness or even necessarily exercise marketing activities better. It's really around how do you try, what is a customer, who is a customer, and how do we really go out and get that customer using marketing and do it in a pretty data-driven way. Very metric focused. So what's a customer worth and what do we want to pay to get it? And how do we quantitatively grow market share and acquire more customers?
Solid. Those are many of the same things we, at least on the metric side, the same things we talk about in the venture world, especially when trying to figure out whether or not an idea is worth taking to market, right? So cost of customer acquisition, lifetime value, how do you drive that cost down over time? So thanks for making the time to do this. Maybe before we jump into competition, just real quick, for somebody who may not be familiar with Sells Group, paint a picture of where you guys are on the journey. Like, how big are you? Maybe some vanity metrics, customers, anything you can share to just kind of help people understand kind of how big you guys are and what you do.
Sure. So we've been doing this for about 7 years. So we're maybe a little bit past the startup phase, but still in that early phase of trying to grow a business and figuring out how do you scale it. We've got about 30 full-time employees at the company, and we're headquartered in Indianapolis. We have offices in Dallas as well, and a few people spread out across the country. We typically are working on active clients between 30 and 50 at a given time. And in our world, a client may do a website or work on a project, and then there's a lull for a few months. So it changes with time. But in a given year, we'll probably work with around 100 companies.
Wow, that's a lot. Sorry. Ours is much less than that. You guys have a lot more projects. That's impressive. All right. So a company comes to you, doesn't have to be a SaaS company. It's great if you want to share some SaaS examples, but a company comes to you and says, okay, we need to hire a marketing firm to help us start to solve the problem of attracting customers and drive revenue into our product. How do you help them understand, maybe the place to start would be, how do you help them understand the market that they're in?
It's usually what we'll do to start, Mike, is we'll use some simple free tools like Google and just go look at keyword search volumes and what are phrases that their customers are using today, or that the owner or founder or marketing team thinks that if someone was saying this, they're looking for us. And we just want to go look out and Google search history and see how much volume has there been? Are there other words that are being used that maybe are different, where there's more volume or more searches? And over time, is that volume increasing or is it decreasing? And that also then begins to paint a picture for us of who else is potentially looking to talk to that same customer and what they're doing. But that's typically where we would start, is what's the universe of people that are looking for this product?
So you start with the customers first, not necessarily the prospective customers first, not necessarily the other firms that might be trying to buy those customers.
Correct. Because when we get a phone call from someone who's saying, hey, I want to grow, what we don't know is they may know who their competitors are. And we want to look at that, but we want to first define what's the even potential market here. So for example, we had a company come to us in the home security space, and they really wanted to grow in their new movers market residentially. Well, we know there's 7.6 million approximately new moves a year. That gives us a large customer base. And you can see, and we use Google as a way to kind of validate oftentimes that. In that case, there was some other research we could look at. But another example, that same security company came to us with a different target market around a new mom with some different parameters. And we realized there's only a couple 100,000 searches a month that are relevant to this. And for that company, that wasn't enough to even really say it's worth it for them to go after. So we usually would start with, is there enough prospective customer interest to even define for this to be viable, to really say we can go grow by this much, or, is the product relevant or not?
So once you find that customer, go the next step? So it's a big enough market. We think we know who the customers are and what they're searching for. What do you guys do next in terms of either then figuring out what are going to be the best ways to reach that customer? What's the type of messaging that's going to resonate with that customer? How do you start to fill in the rest of that picture?
Yeah, so that's then when we would start looking at what the competitors in the space are doing. So who else is interested in that traffic and how are they approaching it? And usually we can see if there's a lot of paid traffic or a lot of paid ads running against those keywords or those search terms, that's going to tell us it's competitive, but it also means that it's probably lucrative because they're willing to pay for a click versus going after it organically. And so that's one way we would start is, okay, who's competing in this space organically and from a paid standpoint, and how aggressively are they? Because that's going to give some hard numbers to look at. And then we'd look at, okay, when you go and you show up and you run that same Google query and you see those competitors show up or others, what's the differences in their offering fundamentally? And we usually start by looking at a pricing level. What's the economic model that the competitors are using? Are they charging a fee for service? Is it a monthly fee? And is there add-on services? Fundamentally, how is that product being offered to you as a customer? Will really then help us begin to paint a picture of here's the customer, prospective customer we want to go after. Here's who's competing, and here's how they're fundamentally offering their solution to the market. And then we can look at that and contrast to what our client's plan was or what their product is and how they price it and how they sell it. So that's usually the starting point for us.
And how does that conversation work? So if I show up and say, I'm providing a transaction-based service to startup competitors, right? I'm providing a transaction-based service where you swipe the credit card each time you want to exercise the service. You do this research on behalf of our team, and you come back and say, well, hey, when we look at that buyer, everybody else in the market is offering a SaaS product. They're offering for $10 a month, you get 2 reports every month kind of a thing. What does that conversation look like then? Do you want to see a difference from the rest of the market? Is the conversation, I'm going to talk to Mike about getting him to change his economic model to be more like everybody else so it's not jarring to the buyer? How do you frame that?
It could go one of two ways. I think if we see that most competitors have a similar pricing model, so using your example of a transaction company where everyone's charging $10 a month, then we want to look at, are there any ways to lower the barrier of switching to us or using our service? So are they charging an implementation fee? Do they have volume thresholds where if you achieve this certain volume of transactions or members, that cost goes lower? Because that can change the offering and how quickly and how likely someone is to come after it. So if everyone's got a similar model, it always begs the question, is there innovation here, not on the product, but the pricing? That's a different kind of conversation. Otherwise, we would look and say, okay, if there is similarity, how do we lower those barriers or the pain points that maybe someone would have to pay for to adopt? And if the pricing models vary, if we realize, okay, there's 3 or 4 different ways out there of pricing this, then we're going to start wanting to do some research on who are those companies targeting. Is it large cap companies, mid cap, small cap? Is it mom and pop shops? Because that may begin to explain the disparity or the differences in the pricing models.
Do you guys do much work with early stage SaaS companies?
We have. Over the years, we've done work with different early stage, from launching to taking something small and trying to help scale it. Primarily been where we've played in the SaaS world.
How often do they know, just referencing what you were mentioning before, are they selling to enterprise clients? Are they selling to individuals? Are they selling to small businesses? How often when somebody shows up and starts working with you, do they know the answer to that? My impression is a number of times they might think, well, we're selling to clearly, Patrick, we're selling to everybody, right? Which from a marketing perspective is not necessarily the best idea in terms of developing a message. How often do you have that conversation, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I would say most of the time they don't know who they're selling to, or it's a very broad answer like, well, we think we can sell to everyone. And that's rarely the case. I mean, there was just a stat recently released that 67% of American households are members of Amazon Prime. Well, that's a level of adoption that's almost unheard of. and really impossible to achieve, I think, for most companies, and probably shouldn't be the target for most companies. There's a reason why Amazon is what it is. So I don't think they oftentimes know that. And what we're really big on is testing, and to have an aggressive testing budget. And so we look at how do you then create metrics around different, using landing pages as an easy way to test different messages of who your customer really is or who you should target. And, we can look at that by looking at keyword terms. How long do they spend time on site if they come to your landing page? And who is that then? And how can we begin to back into who really this message is going to resonate the most with? And we usually want to try to say, okay, from our approach as sales group, we're not always necessarily trying to say we're going to go find you the most volume of new clients, but we want to find you the cream of the crop. And so where is it that we're going to get the easiest conversion, the quickest sale, the slowest lead time? And let's go focus on that customer, because that creates resources then and operational efficiencies where then you can start going after those maybe second or third tranche of potential customers for you. But where we found the most success is by trying to really define a small subset that we know is going to convert well. We go win them over, and then we begin working up from there.
So what you just hit on feels like the jumping off point to me into product roadmap, which is when you do that analysis of the different customers. So who's going to have the lowest lead time, the easiest to convert, right? At whatever the price point is, that starts to imply to me that you're now segmenting out different areas of the market. And then my guess is you're then probably starting to have a conversation around how does this project stack up feature to feature against the other people who are going after that specific customer, right?
Correct.
So talk me through that conversation with one of your customers, and how do you are they normally really open to you coming in and saying, well, look, you're the only one who doesn't have feature X, and for that particular segment, which you can convert quickly on, that may mean you need to make that investment to build out feature X. Do you do that kind of conversation? If so, how do you frame that?
So, Mike, when we would have that conversation with a client of ours, we're actually going to focus on not necessarily being that innovative from a feature set. Someone's winning today, and they've built a business and they're delivering value. And how can we, as cheaply as possible, match that and then win on the pricing piece? Because if we can win on the pricing, that equation of how we charge and when it charges and when it cash flows, we can always increase that over time. You can have once you're adding value and you're sticky with someone, you can always move your price up, or then you can add new features or new product features. And so we would typically say, who's out there that we can as easily as possible go replicate and as cheaply as possible, and then prove that we can win that customer, and then scale up from there or adjust from there as we go. But, I learned a lot, Mike, from the home security industry. One of my long-term clients and closest mentors is a very successful entrepreneur in that space. And when he started, there was about 4,000 dealers. Then they all were essentially the same size. They had the exact same product to sell. And, he today makes up 40% of that market. So now I don't know the exact numbers. I think the last time I heard, there's 500 to 600 dealers. And the difference is him. He won all of that business. And what he knew is he could put his competitors out of business by doing the same thing that they did, because fundamentally they were offering the same product. He would innovate on the pricing and figure out how to win that customer today. And then that starts to put a lot of pressure on your competitors to get better all of a sudden. And now they're starting to think about, spending money and resources on new features. And they get into a reactive standpoint where now maybe they're thinking about new features just because they feel like they need something new, and it's really maybe not what that customer wants. And now you've got your competitor distracted, spending money, doing things that may or may not be valuable. They're trying, and if you've got a clear sense of what you're doing and you want to create some disruption in the market, how can you go find 2 or 3 competitors and really rattle them and get them distracted? And if you do that intentionally, then you're in a place of calm and you can choose to win. You know what you're doing. You're not now finding yourself in a storm where all of a sudden the waves are high. You knew what you were going into and they didn't. And you did it at half the cost because you let them figure out what to do. And then all you had to do is recreate it. And so you're able to get that done much faster, much cheaper. And then you create chaos in their business and with their investors and their software engineers. And then you go ruthlessly attack their customers and win them.
So I'm smiling because yesterday I interviewed Jeb Banner with Boardable for the podcast that's going to air just before this one. So whatever episode you had last week, go listen to that if you haven't listened to it. Because while talking to Jeb about Boardable and like what's the big innovation, right? Like, and he's in a red ocean, right? Like there's been board management software for a long time, and he would be the first to tell you we're not really innovating on features, right? We probably have fewer features than many of our competitors, and I think he did say that explicitly on the podcast. He's like, there's two ways we're different. We're easier to use. We're simple software, and price. Right? Like we're coming in at just a fundamentally different price point for the market. And we believe that we can roll up because of that. So that's super, like you just articulated in a crystal clear way what I heard yesterday interviewing him for the podcast before this one, which is fantastic. And that totally makes sense to me in a red ocean where there's a lot of competitors competing for the same buyer. Riff, if you can, in the same way, like riff a little bit about strategy in more of a blue ocean setting. So you do the analysis, you don't find a lot of people trying to sell to the same buyer, at least the same product to the same buyer. How do you think of a strategy in that sense?
Yeah. So just to close the loop on the kind of red ocean, when you're a new entrant into a red ocean, that could scare a lot of people away. I actually find it exciting. It means you have a significant advantage. You're not going to have to spend nearly as much money and resources as they did to get into the red ocean. And price is the easiest thing to innovate on. It doesn't take any money to innovate on price. And you can very quickly disrupt your competitors. In a blue ocean environment, when you're coming in and if we're working with someone and maybe they've got a new product that no one has or very few people have, and it's kind of wide open, and how do we help them then segment the market or go after it? How do we help them think through it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or that seems like you have a crystal clear strategy for how to compete in a red ocean. I'm just curious, like if price is not going to be the distinguisher because nobody is buying this, like nobody's, let's do a real example. So 10 years ago, nobody was trying to buy drones, right? So like you're the first drone manufacturer, you're trying to put that into the market. How do you do that? Like what's the strategy there?
I think when we're thinking about a blue ocean, what we typically are wanting to do is just make a mess and go fast. We're not too worried about nailing the exact right customer experience. Frankly, we're not necessarily trying to nail client satisfaction. We want to be loud and fast to see, is this actually a blue ocean or is it a blue pond? Is this really a meaningful business opportunity here or not? Or is it just no one's done this and there's a reason? And maybe it's because, and it depends on what the client wants. It may be a $50 million market, and if they got 10 million of it, they're actually happy with that. But we got to first figure out if it's a blue ocean or a blue pond and go loud and fast, make a mess, sign clients up, and frankly, try 7 different price points. Who really cares? And some of them you may lose money on, some you may make money on. But what you're trying to figure out, or what we would guide them to figure out, is let's really try to define what is the ocean and what is it that we're trying to do. And I think that's this idea of blue ocean, red ocean has been popular as a business term for a while now, and it's very helpful. But I think, like with all analogies, there's downsides to it. And I frankly don't want to be in just a massive blue ocean floating around. I want to know kind of I want to be in control. We want to be in control in the environment and kind of try to define this is our part of the ocean. And that's hard to when there's not pre-existing, markets and competitors and customer sets. And so just create some chaos, make some noise, sign customers up in different industries, different price points, feature different things, and then start to look to say where are there similarities and where are there differences, and then quickly evolve. And we recently launched a SaaS product for a company out of California that was relatively blue ocean. And similar thing, we developed 5 or 6 kind of offerings or feature sets, and we went out there and we were loud with all of them. And within 3 months, we had killed 2 of them. Within 6 months, we had killed another one of them. And then we quickly saw it. And of those 3 that we killed, one of them probably was a good idea. It just wasn't ever going to be economically worth it to that customer to go do it. So within a matter of 6 months, we had pretty quickly narrowed down, this is where we can play in this blue ocean, and let's go gain subscribers or customers in that case.
Awesome. Can I switch gears a little bit and talk more about Sales Group? How do you think about competition for Sales Group?
That's a question people have asked me before. And so I shared we've been in business for about 7 years. And I would say for the last 4 or 5 years, I don't know that, frankly, we've ever really competed against someone. And that's a bit of a bold statement, but typically when we're talking to a client or a prospective customer, they're not usually considering us versus someone else. And we don't necessarily try to compare and contrast us to maybe someone else who has similar skills or services that they offer. We're not really too concerned about the competition, to be frank. We know we're more interested, and this comes from some coaching from a program called Strategic Coach, which is a great entrepreneur program to be in. It talks a lot about mindsets, and the person you like the most is you. And so how do you go find people who share that same mindset? And that's oftentimes going to be a more rewarding, lucrative, and positive engagement and partnership. And so our competitors aren't us, and we're not them. So we don't really care. We're trying to find people who are like us. And that kind of changes the whole conversation a lot for us from a competitive standpoint.
So I hear that in the sales cycle, you're not necessarily comparing yourself to somebody else, and you probably are one of the better business developers in the community in terms of finding somebody at their moment of need before they've maybe engaged in a search, right? And I think that's also the type of clients you're going after. You're not necessarily providing marketing services to Fortune 100 companies who have every firm on the planet knocking on their door, right? So I think that from a strategy perspective makes a lot of sense, but there are other small, scrappy marketing firms, whether it's in this community or around the country, that are doing some similar things. Do you ever kind of peek your head up and take a look at what they're doing, what might be working, what's not working, and leverage that to influence maybe how you think about strategy here at Sales Group?
Yes, I spend time looking at what other marketing agencies or technology firms are doing and kind of how they're pricing and how they're going to market and what their websites look like. And sometimes we sign up for their email newsletters and we go to their events just to get a feel for them and what they're doing. But I spend more of my time actually looking at other businesses that are disrupting their industries and trying to create analogies from what they're doing to what we're doing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's more how we approach it.
Great. How do you find some of those businesses that are disrupting their industries?
Wall Street Journal. Have always read that almost cover to cover most days, and just looking at what companies are doing and how they're doing it, and then trying to bring those analogies in. And there's the obvious ones like the Teslas and the Amazon and Apples of the world, but there's all kinds of smaller companies that are doing things in a very competitive market space. And I look at our space, we're in a commodity business. I mean, there's a low barrier to entry to provide marketing services, and there's lots of competitors out there that offer it. And so how do you do that differently is something we spend a lot of time thinking about, but I think it's easier to find those insights or that inspiration from looking at how someone else did it than versus looking in kind of a closed box environment of how everyone in my world, if you will, is thinking about innovating.
I feel like, at least, I mean, I've known you for a few years now, and Sales Group for a few years now. You've always been like the riff you did earlier on innovating on price, right? It's very much like, if I would have thought of Sales Group 2 years ago, I would have thought outcomes based, pricing, right? Like you get paid when you're earning revenue for the client, which to me is a huge differentiator in the space, right? It is the thing that would, in a commodity space, would instantly get somebody to gravitate towards working with a firm like yours versus even outsourcing to the low cost provider in India, right? Or whatever. When you think of other models of disruption, other than maybe performance-based pricing or outcomes-based pricing, what are some of the things that you think in the next 5 years, could be way out there, you may want to play around with in some aspect of the business model here at Sells Group?
I think when, what's happening at a macro level is people expect a more personalized, a concierge type feel of the people they're working with. People want to be, today, we as consumers, whether you're a business owner or an individual, you're buying from hundreds of different brands and different companies. And you want to feel like you matter and you're rewarded and your loyalty counts, and everyone wants to feel like a VIP anymore. And so I think for us, it's how do you take the business and move it to where that client experience really is unique in and of itself, and more than just, hey, come to a cocktail hour, or we're going to send you a branded speaker at Christmas, right? That's what a lot of the industry's done. But I think you've got to start thinking about how do you, especially as more millennials come into the market and they are business owners and making decisions, they want that experience. And so how do we start to shape that client journey and that client roadmap and create a really unique experience that maybe has nothing to do with marketing? It has everything to do with the relationship and the reality of being partners trying to go do something together. And how do you accomplish that together? So like an example, one of the things we've thought about is there's a great organization down in Southern California that builds homes in Mexico. And a lot of companies take teams there because it works on teamwork. You can build a home together in 2 days, and it's quite a rewarding experience. When we thought about that's the type of thing we want to work with a company who'd want to do that with us. And so that's part of our client experience is let's go build a home together, because at the end of the day, that's fun, different. But that's the same thing we're trying to do in business is come together, collaborate to accomplish something, usually in a quick period of time that makes a meaningful difference. And so those are the types of things that we're thinking about beyond just innovating at a price level. How do you innovate at an experience level?
Nice. I like that. Okay. I think the last thing I want to chat about a little bit. So I'd be interested just in your thoughts on marketing trends in general, new emerging platforms. Like, do you see much? Do you have thoughts on how voice will change marketing? The voice platforms will change marketing in the future. Do you see new emerging social media trends? Like anything in terms of like when you're like, what are you excited and your team is excited and learning more about to try to better understand where the puck is moving?
Yeah, there's 3 areas that have kind of caught our interest in the last year or so. One is virtual reality. I think it really is a different mode of communication. It's much like, when we first had pen and paper and then we first had TV, VR really changes how communication will happen and makes it multidimensional. And it's not quite here yet in an easy to use way, but it's getting here quickly. The technology is getting better. The ease of use is getting better. And so I think virtual reality will really change marketing and communication at large. At a technology level, blockchain is something that we're very interested in, and seeing how that's changing how computers interact and systems and how much more you can do with data and managing that data to be smarter. And then the third thing tied to that is voice, thinking about how even you can see in Google search history how queries have changed because of voice. And what does that mean for platforms like an Alexa that's now controlling how we access the internet versus, say, Google? And so how does voice really start to play into how a company gets found with voice-based navigation systems?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the quotes I think Gary Vee likes to say quite a bit, and I'm probably misquoting this, but something like 20% or 25% of all search traffic today for Google is done over voice, whether it's through Siri or Alexa or whatever the case may be, or maybe Google's own platform. But you think of that and all of the revenue that comes off of AdWords today, which is all screen-based, right? And when you're just searching for something with voice and there's no opportunity to just show results next to that, right? You're just going to get the answer. To me, it really begs the question on where that money goes 10 years from now when 80% of the search traffic is done through voice. The other thing that I think he's really good at pointing out, which I find really interesting, is like when you say today you might Google pizza and then just do a location search to see pizza that's around you. In the future, you're just going to say, send a pizza to my office or send a pizza to my house. And to his point, the big question there is, are you just getting Amazon's branded pizza? Are you just getting the one that paid the most to get that lead through Amazon? Or do you have to build brand that's strong enough that somebody will actually say in their request, send me a Greek's pizza or something like that? Do you have any thoughts on some of those?
This is all fun to think about, and who knows where it goes. Is it, the value of building a brand could really matter in voice. It could make marketing much more kind of aligned with how we are, where it's performance-based. So, now companies are not paying for a click. They're actually paying to get the chance to deliver that pizza for you. And there's kind of a direct line of sight to it. I think and I don't know enough about kind of the evolution of voice technology, but I think what will be interesting to see is how that converges with virtual reality and how we may in fact be seeing a lot more. It just will look very different than a search query. Some of the cutting edge VR applications I've seen, you, instead of saying, Alexa, order me a pizza, I'm going to jump over to a fountain in Rome and say, I want a pizza. And there's going to be 2 or 3 pizza stores there that I can look at and pick which pizza I want. And that's actually what creates the order from whoever it's coming from. And so there's a lot of talk in the VR space about carving out your virtual office, your virtual footprint. What does that look like? And how does VR get navigated? And maybe it's just because I know more about virtual reality and I feel like it's so close to being here, but I think voice may or may not be that disruptive compared to what virtual reality and that technology will do.
Right on. All right, man. Well, if people want to learn more about Cells Group, or if they want to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, you can go to our website, cellsgroup.com, or you can reach out to me through email at pcells@cellsgroup. And we're always happy to help a company think about its business model, how to scale it, how to grow it, what's working, what's not. And so if anyone's interested, happy to talk.
Thanks so much.
If you're thinking of launching a SaaS product, Startup Competitors can provide data on your closest competitors, survey potential users, or provide other product validation services. Learn more at startupcompetitors.com.